my amazing colleagues at AMS, Amanda, our COO, and of course, Angela, the founder and executive director, to kick off this latest fireside chat about identifying as a transracial adoptee and its impacts. It's a doozy, but one that will nonetheless be very educational. A few housekeeping notes before we dive in this evening. Please do your best to stay on mute to avoid any interruptions to tonight's discussions. If you have any questions for AMS or for our very generous and amazing panelists tonight, please drop them in the Zoom chat and we'll get to them as soon as possible. And lastly, this session is being recorded and will be available for about 30 days once we wrap up here this evening. And before we officially begin, I also just want to give some background information for anyone who might be new to AMS. Maybe this is your first fireside chat. Welcome. AMS is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we provide virtual mentorship for adoptees by adoptees. And Angela, our executive director and moderator for this evening, who we all know, incorporated AMS in 2021 after decades of work mentoring adoptees and amplifying their voices. And AMS offers kind of our two core services are one-on-one mentorship for adoptees and group format mentorship in the Adoptee Lounge. All of our mentors are adoptees themselves, which is really important because we believe in helping each other through shared lived experience and building community. But without further ado, don't let me take away from our amazing panelists for tonight. Angela, I will toss it to you to introduce our panelists.
Yay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Oh, I wish I asked where in the world you're coming in from. Maybe I can just ask that now. It's so fun to see the reach. So maybe put the state you are in. If you're outside of the United States, tell us that too. Thank you. And some of you, I think, are writing to me directly. Change your toggle so it says share with everyone if you're comfortable. That is so awesome. Oh, London. I just had a feeling we had some people from outside the States. Awesome. So tonight, our focus is on transracial adoption. We do offer these fireside chats 3 times a year around different topics. Sometimes people ask if we only work with transracial adoptees, and no, we work with all adoptees 12 and up. But tonight's focus will be on transracial adoption. So I am thrilled and honored to have each of these folks share. I want to just remind the audience, if you're not an adoptee or if you've never, even if you are an adoptee and you've never spoken publicly, it is a different um, experience to try to articulate your story publicly like this. And so I just demand kindness and respect and overall just a general and genuine belief in the truth that one adoptee does not speak for all. So if there is something stated, you're just like, I don't agree with that, or, ugh, that's not my daughter's experience. Like, that is true. Both are true. And here is a time for these adoptees to share their story in the ways that they feel comfortable. As you saw in the slide deck, ethical story sharing is very important to me. And that idea for this setting has to do with how adoptees are often asked to share their stories with an intensity and like people owe it. And so here I make it very clear to the panelists, and I want to tell all of you that if there's a question they're not comfortable answering, they're so empowered to say, I don't share that with strangers, and that we will respect that. That's also what we want to teach, younger adoptees coming up in the world, that they are not owed their story. But thankfully, these four want to share, and we love to kind of highlight their voice. And oftentimes it's another step in the mentoring process for me. So I'm feeling a lot of proud feelings already. One last note is that we also compensate our speakers, which is part of the ethical values we hold. And so, for those of you who donated to this fireside chat, or if you want to donate after, if you got something out of it, know that funding is going back to, in this case, these four who are just working really hard to educate and share their truth. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's hear it from our adoptees. I'm going to ask them each three questions. And after three questions for each of them, we'll open it up to you. So you're welcome to put questions in the chat right now as they come up, but we'll get to them after I ask these three. And then at that time, I'll also invite folks to come off mute if you want to ask a question that way. So let me start with Trish. You're going by Trisha tonight? Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
either way is fine.
Trisha, can you just give folks kind of a summary of your bio? Who are you? And then if you could end by sharing if this is your first time speaking publicly about your adoption.
Sure. So I am a biracial, transracially adopted person. I am biracial, black and white. My adoptive family is white, and I was adopted when I was 5 months old. One of the things that has really struck me recently is just the information around being adopted. And, part of it was meeting Angela and coming to hear her speak, and also a friend who was working on some adoption history through school. And I've just decided it's time to kind of jump in and figure out who I am and where I came from. So I'm late in life, exploring my adoption. But one of the things that I really think about my experiences is that I also have a disability, and what you can't see right now is that I am a wheelchair user. And so I see so many similarities between disability and adoption when it comes to marginalization. I think perspectives and ways that you should be or shouldn't be, things that you should do or should say or not say. And so, I think it's just an extension of the advocacy that I've already done as an individual with a disability to really explore my adoption further. So that's what brings me here tonight. And this is actually the first time that I've really talked about my adoption in a public forum. I do a lot of speaking that's related to disability. So I'm not new to standing on stages or telling stories of my life that, might be a little bit difficult for people to hear or used to be difficult for me to say. But I think this is where I can share my story and in a safe environment and hopefully help other people along their journeys.
Thank you, Trish. I'm so glad you added that part about kind of coming to explore your adoption at your age. There's definitely a misconception that mentorship is often for kids, and people really don't realize we have so many adult adoptees who are just starting to dig into their stories. So I'm hopeful that we can normalize that there's no shame in that. And actually, it makes great sense with relation to the shame that has pervaded over adoption for so long. So thanks for sharing. Katie, tell us about you and if you've shared publicly.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Katie. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Santiago, Chile, and adopted when I was 3 months old. My adoptive parents are white. The rest of my family is white. And for a really long time growing up, I never talked about adoption. I never met anyone else who was adopted until I was in high school. And probably 10 times out of 10, if I even said the word adoption, I just would burst into tears. um, because I just carried a lot of abandonment and shame and like unknown around my story. So it was always really hard to answer people's questions about family or if I knew my biological family. So all of those questions would just kind of like build up in me, and I just stopped talking about it altogether. It wasn't until I was 29 that I learned the truth about my adoption story. My adoptive mother thought that it would be too hard for me to handle or be something that was really sad for me to hear. But it actually was something that unlocked a whole world of hurt and pain. And like Angela said, you know, late in life, I started the journey of taking DNA tests and researching, listening to podcasts, and eventually finding this incredible community. So, as far as speaking publicly, I have done another fireside chat with this group, but it was closed to the public. It was just for other adoptees and the rest of the community. So this is my first open to the public opportunity to speak. So yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here and excited that this opportunity is afforded to people who are potentially adopting or who have been adopted to find answers and find support. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Thank you, Katie. You said something that I wanted to add to. Oh, you just spoke beautifully about, sharing. If you even uttered the word adoption, you'd start crying. And that is a powerful thing to share with how many 56 strangers here. So it made me remind myself to tell all of you that on Zoom, we can still be interactive and show gratitude or thanks or like astonishment or whatever you want through your virtual signals. In the chat, please, if you hear something that resonates or Jesse, that heart, it feels good. It helps us know people are listening, they're caring, they're lifting us up. This is a safe place. So use those emojis, say something in chat. You could say, I hear that. You could say, woo, Rebecca, all those hearts. Yes. Okay. Just wanted to add that. Thanks, Katie. All right, Q, tell us about you and your public speaking with adoption history.
Yeah, so I am a transracial adoptee born in Bulgaria. I was adopted at the age of 2, and I grew up in Montana and was raised as an only child. There's actually a lot of adoption within my family. I have an aunt that is a birth mother and is in reunion with her daughter. And my dad is a domestic late discovery adoptee. So, with that being said, adoption was something that was talked about within my family, but the conversations never went very deep. And I think part of that was I didn't want my loyalty to be in question. So, I ended up staying silent. And I think staying silent also created a lot of pain. And I will say that finding the language behind my story has just been really important in understanding who I am and who I want to become. And this is my first time speaking publicly. I am really nervous to be here, excited. And I think I've gone into this call reminding myself that I do deserve to be here. I think it's so easy for belonging, or it's so easy to question belonging. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that every adoptee's voice is impactful and important, even those voices that, even those voices who are working on themselves.
Yeah, Q, I remember one of the first times we met for mentoring, and you said you're a Bulgarian adoptee, and my response, having been working in this adoption field for a long time, was, gosh, I think you might be the first Bulgarian adoptee that I've ever met. And I was said that to you not as a compliment, but I said it to you to understand the isolation that I imagine you'd feel. And then we did a little research and found, do you remember how many Bulgarians were adopted to America in, I think, what were we looking around? What years?
I think, I mean, the bulk of the adoptions were within like the mid 90s. So,
Yeah. And even that, it was in the hundreds, I think, as opposed
mhm.
to, Chinese adoptees or Korean adoptees where there are huge communities. And that's not exactly a great thing, but it is good in terms of adoptees being able to find each other. And you have not been able to do that. Yeah. Thank you so much. You deserve to be here. So glad you're here. Ilbersal, talk to us.
First, I must make sure I'm not on mute and that I'm in focus. Can everybody hear me? I was kind of late to the sound check. Anyway, my name is Ilbersal. I'm a transracial international adoptee or trafficked person from Haiti. That's where I came from. I was adopted somewhere between 2.5 and 3, according to the paperwork that they gave my folks. I touched down in Fort Lauderdale, and my white adopted parents were in Tucson, Arizona at the time. So that's where I got my start in 86 or 87, whenever that was. Um, ooh, what were the questions? Forgot the questions.
Just curious about your upbringing, like your
Oh,
siblings, and then your public speaking history around adoption.
so I was the first of what would be 4. We were all transracially adopted. I have 3 younger siblings. I have a younger brother, and 2 younger siblings after that. They were all domestically adopted. I was the only international adoptee. And while we were a family unit, a family of multiple adopted kids and biracial kids with white parents, there was a togetherness, and there was also like a separate or sort of a sense of isolation, at least for me. I'm not going to speak on their lives or their journeys, but like I'm going to speak from my adopted place, not negating the fact that I have siblings, but from like an individual level, just contextualizing like my space in the world. Um, I I was isolated. There was a sense of being culturally isolated, having been born in the Caribbean, Haiti, and then being raised in what would start out to be Arizona, and then I would end up in Grand Island, Nebraska, middle of the Midwest, for a good chunk of years. Probably think it was like 7 or 8 years, and then I would make my way down to the Oklahoma Panhandle, and then Texas, where I currently reside. I'm in Austin right now, and I've been here for 10, 12 years. Um, this is my first rodeo. I was looking back at the archives, and I don't know if it's ironic or just serendipitous that this time 2 years ago I was in my first fireside chat with y'all. I don't know if it was open or closed, but like, yeah, there was a poster. It's like, yeah, that was May 19th and whatever it was. Um, while I said I did grow up with adoptive siblings, there wasn't a lot of adoptee centered talk in my family. So to the point of coming to find AMS in my, early or my mid 30s, or not just AMS, I'm sorry, coming to find Angela Tucker, and through her documentary Closure, and then um being exposed to like an online and digital adoptee community with resources that weren't, and I say they weren't available, but my folks didn't have or utilize them when I was coming up in the 90s and the 80s and the 90s. So I've been engaged with the adopted community and engaged with some form of, call it, mentorship in the last 7 or 8 years, easy, and have been vocal or been on panels, have been talking online for since the pandemic for sure. So there's 5 or 6 years where I've been, a face in the adoptee community that engages with mentorship, engages with adoptee lounges and other online adoptee centered spaces that I gravitated to because of the resources that provided, because I didn't have any of these things growing up. While I found out later there were, camps and, retreats for adoptees and foster kids and youth. Growing up in Grand Island, Nebraska, we just had our family. So we didn't talk about adoption, we didn't engage with adoption that sort of way. I remember that, like, for example, like my history, everything that existed about me prior to being adopted came in a little cigarette box, essentially. So I had some pictures, some of my official documents, some clothes, some trinkets from the orphanage, and I believe it was a picture of the person that said it was my mother, a picture of the person that said it was my father, and that was what I knew in terms of like having a history that existed, or a life that exists before adoption, and then that was all I knew as far as the culture and the language and the place that I came from prior to being in my mid to late 20s and 30s and engaging with the fracture, engaging with adoption in a way that contextualizes having your whole life in a box and then being somebody else's child in some other place, and then living out that life through them, and then having questions and having conflict and having sort of issues about identity, race, and things like that were talked about when I was a kid. That's me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My next question for all of you is why you wanted to participate tonight. And I should add, I see Amy vigorously nodding their head as you were speaking, Obersal, about so many things. I think one of the things was when Obersal said your parents didn't utilize the resources that may have been out there. And I saw the nodding of the head, and I think that was to say, sometimes we hear adoptive parents say, like, the resources aren't there. I didn't know what to do. And I think your framing was intentional to say that perhaps there was at that point even some resources, but there was a choice perhaps not to access it, which I think is a great segue into this next question of why you want to speak. And I'm hopeful that you can do that in a story format, sharing a story about why you want to share, but that piggybacking off of Elbersal's comment made me think that sometimes these adoptee-led options and opportunities aren't seen as kind enough or welcoming enough, or people really don't always love to hear our voices, and so we aren't heard. So I'm so grateful for the people who are here tonight, because it seems like it's a step in that direction. But Trish, would you start us off and share why you wanted to speak about this?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important to speak about this because, there are so many varying levels of what people know about adoption. And that's whether that's your just average person on the street or that's a parent who's going into adoption. And, for me, I feel like there were a lot of years where I felt kind of that isolation. One of the other panelists spoke about that before, and it wasn't because my family didn't love me. It wasn't because I didn't have a great relationship with them, because I did. But there's only so much they know about being biracial and what it's like to be worried about, is my hair too curly to look white like my family? Am I standing out? Do they understand some of the challenges that I experience at school, whether that's people calling me a certain name or calling out, my adoption because I don't look anything like my family or my brother who I went to school with. And so I think it's just important for people to know that there are resources out there and that there are people who can shed a light on this experience because it is really unique. And for the longest time, I mean, most of my life, and I'm in my mid 50s, I knew that it was unique, but I didn't have any words to put with that. And so this has really helped me put words with my feelings, with the things that have happened to me or transpired in my life, with, you know, all of it. And so I hope that this group can help at least one person, you know, see adoption in a new light and be able to either be prepared when it comes to adopting a child, or maybe giving yourself grace if you are adopted and you never had the words to speak about it either. And so, you know, we're here to, you know, open the floor and be that first step of courage for you, I think. But just to let you know that you're not alone, and that there are other people who get that feeling of being isolated and alone and wondering, you know, did I do something wrong, or should I be ashamed of this? And you know, the answer is no, but there's definitely steps that you can take to feel better about yourself and your situation if you just know that other people are experiencing it too.
Thank you, Trish. I think I'll come back to you at some point to ask a deeper question. And you said you knew adoption was unique, and I'm wondering if you could share a story after the others speak about how you knew that at a young age, and that example of, you know, straightening your hair to make it look like more white. I think that's a good example, but also, like, did you know what you were trying to assimilate to, or how did that, um, or was it just something you did to try to be like them? So you can think on that while we go to Katie, who I'd love for you to share. You've had so many things you shared last week during our rehearsal and even today about why you want to be here. So I'm hoping you can share some of that.
Yeah, I guess as far as like my why, it really stems from this juxtaposition of society kind of sensationalizing adoption for to rescue babies and like to complete people's families, and it just it highlights children and babies as being like, you know, the end, like that's it. Once you get the baby, then you're a family. And even though that's true, you are part of a family, like those babies grow up and they become adults and they have questions. And I know for me, when I was younger, I like I said, I never really talked about my adoption. I was too nervous to answer the questions of, you know, why didn't your biological parents love you enough to keep you? I didn't know the answer to that when I was in elementary school. Or why don't you look like your parents? Like I didn't know, I didn't have the words, or like feel safe enough to share even what little I did know then. And so once I became an adult, and once I learned about the complete story of my adoption, which just really quick to like give context, prior to being 29, the information that I had was that I was left at the hospital, and that the my biological mother left an alias at the hospital, so she wasn't able to be contacted. I didn't know anything about my biological father. He wasn't on any paperwork, and I don't think he was even there when I was born. And so that's kind of what I rolled with for 29 years, and was just like I was abandoned, unwanted, left at a hospital. And every December 19th is kind of like we have like a dinner. It was like when I came home, and so we just have like a little homecoming dinner and kind of like um, you know, reminisce. And when I was 29, my mom told me that what really happened was that I was born at the hospital, and I was found on a bench, by a guard at the Chilean, like, am, like ambassador, like, I don't know, like an embassy, like a US embassy. and that at that time in 87, a guard passed in front of the embassy every 2 minutes. And so just hearing that, I was taken out of the hospital. My biological mother, tried. They said they found a baby that was about 4 days, 5 days old on the week of September 20th, which in 87 was a Sunday. So it could have been any day that week that I was born. Um, just learning like the facts really kind of opened my eyes to see that my biological mother tried and that she had a plan and that she put me in a place that was going to be safe for me. And so from there, in the adoptee community, we have this phrase called the fog, and it's just kind of, I don't know exactly how to explain it. I really only know how to like feel it, but you just kind of like shut everything else out and kind of like pantomime through life, and you're just kind of like, this is the story I was given. And when the fog lifts and you like learn new information, it starts to open up new avenues of how to understand yourself. And that's kind of when my fog started to at least clear a little bit and just kind of be like, oh, I'm not this unwanted thing. Like, someone tried and she probably just didn't have the support that she needed enough to keep me. And, there's a lot of other little like nuanced things, but once I realized that, I began to see my relationship with my parents in a whole other way. And I began to see how they had their own fog of being like, well, you're a part of our family. We're going to raise you how we were raised. And I didn't have a lot of support when I was younger of like different foods, different music, different TV shows, different movies, different cultural things. They told me that a lot of that fell off when I was younger, or they just got lazy and stopped going to like groups where there was other adoptees. And I just kind of was raised the way they were raised in their family. But I remember a specific argument with my parents where we were talking about this, and this kind of like juxtaposition of being in their family, but also feeling this new connection to biologicalness identity. And my mom literally said, well, we adopted you into our family, so you have to adapt to us. And I was like, I don't actually. I wish that you would want to know who I am and like how I think and how I process things. Like for so long I thought that was just me being a kid and me being over dramatic or too sensitive. Like all these adjectives that my parents always said that I was like too much. But now as an adult, those things haven't gone away and you still don't see this whole other side of me that I'm exploring. And I don't really honestly know how much they want to see that, but it just every single day that I get to talk to other people who are adopted or talk to other people who are adopting, it just reminds me of all the hard work that I'm doing now as like a 37-year-old that I could have done when I was younger or even a teenager or in therapy or alongside my family, that I didn't get to do. And so that's that's really like my why is I want people to understand adoption past just getting a baby and past just, their years and years of infertility and just wanting a baby so bad that they'll do anything, and then kind of unconsciously dismissing that baby's heritage and where they come from. I don't think that my parents necessarily do it on purpose to dismiss that part of me, but I think if they had known more, we could have had such a deeper relationship. So that's like really kind of my why is like I want parents, future parents, and other adoptees to feel like, there's hope for connection with your adoptive family if adoption is what you decide to do. Um, and that's my prayer for them too, is that they have that connection that everyone deserves. So that's my
Katie,
why.
Katie, you are getting so much love. I don't know if you can see all the head nodding and the hearts. I'm interpreting that love as like, okay, Jessie Becker, she's already crying, she says. I think it's this is the support place that I wanted so much to cultivate, whereas some other adoptee panels that we have out in the world definitely feel I have felt like I'm supposed to speak us to a certain narrative. And I think there's some love in the Zoom room to say like, thank God for these adoptees who aren't just speaking that narrative. So thank you, thank you. I'm going to put in the chat the adoptee consciousness model, which is what we base a lot of our mentoring around. And Katie brought up the phrase coming out of the fog. And that was and is just a very popular phrase for adoptees. And I think this adoptee consciousness model explains it. Essentially, this status quo kind of phase that adoptees are in, where you really believe the societal norms. You know, adoption's so great. I have loving parents. I would have died if I didn't get adopted. My birth parents aren't good people. They could never, they wanted to give me away. Like the societal norms that are pushed on us for when we're in that status quo phase, which you can see on that link, that is essentially what it means. And then there might be a disruption. Something happens. For some people, it's they get pregnant, and that's a big deal because it might be the first time they have a connection to their own biology. Or for everyone, there's a different disruption where all of a sudden you're kind of like, wait, adoption is related to racism, classism. Like, oh gosh, I never thought about that. And so this is a really beautiful model that we train our mentors in. So take a look at that for those of you who are curious. Q, would you talk to us about why you wanted to be here?
Yes. So I think a big reason why I'm here is there aren't a lot of Bulgarian adoptee voices in our community. And I hope that with time, more voices will emerge. I think being a Bulgarian adoptee has come with its own unique challenges, ones that I'm still navigating even today. A big part of that struggle has been with my racial and ethnic identity. I never felt like I fully fit the label of being a transracial adoptee. And for the first time, my dad did acknowledge me being a transracial adoptee, and that was huge. But I also needed that acknowledgement years earlier. And I guess I just always thought of myself as being white. I didn't really want to be seen as being different. I do remember drawing a family photo when I was young, and my mom questioning it and asking why I was so dark. And reality is both my parents are white. I think growing up, I would tell people I was Bulgarian, but I really didn't know what it meant. I didn't grow up with the culture, the language, or the history. So I guess that disconnect made it hard to embrace that part of self. And I would get questions about the country and often felt embarrassed not knowing the answers. And sometimes I still kind of feel a little bit embarrassed not having the answers. And ironically, I learned more about Bulgaria through a neighbor whose son was in the Peace Corps over there and a professor I had in college than I did in my own household.
Thank you. Oversal, why do you want to share today?
Oh, the why. Um, I want to share because, well, not primarily, but for selfish reasons, like I feel better about my existence here when I am communing with other adoptees. when I'm talking to them specifically, or talking with them specifically. And to that, like, if there is a benefit to other adoptees with regards to my being community with adoptees, that's the why I want to be here. That's why I continue to share. That's why I show up in these spaces and communicate publicly. I try not to get sort of lost, but like I had a lot. I'm sorry, I'm taking notes in terms of like trying to be coherent in my response. Um, Katie, and I hear this from everywhere, and I think about this in terms of like not the fog comment, but like the as a teenager, as a guy in my early 20s, prior to being in real community uh, with adoptees outside of my siblings, um, I wasn't. So up until that point, um, just trying to survive as a 6 foot Black man in Midwestern America, like I'm I'm having to tackle and navigate the world based off of where my parents are. Let's say initially, since I'm based off of where we live in predominantly white spaces, and Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, wherever, um, that are inherently foreign to me and systemically hostile. That 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 engages the way I have to move, and that is a direct result of being transracially adopted, being taken from an island in the Caribbean where there are essentially no white people to the United States, where race is this construct that even at 5, 3 or 4 or 5, puts me in harm's way in cases of just being in a store with my parents and being profiled or being questioned, or walking down the neighborhood and going to the elementary school and being stopped, being pulled over, being questioned, not just because I was innately doing something wrong, but because to the point of being so culturally isolated in the towns we lived in, is that I'm essentially out of place, right? So I belong, but I don't belong. And those interactions, those engagements, and then growing up with that, it's just I'm carrying all these things, these racial things, and like that sort of being on edge, and then being culturally isolated, and then just being lonely, just being sad, just being pressed, and I have all these sort of things are like I'm wrestling with. And so I say all that to say, um, once I find through media, through art, um, things that I can identify with as Black, or as culturally, enriching, um, whether it's film or movies or documentaries about transracial adoptees, documentaries that sort of speak to me, um, I don't have any place to articulate that want of understanding, that support, that 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 love that I'm also getting from my parents, but I don't have any place to articulate the disconnect, in being transracial adoptee in the world. And no amount of love and understanding from the people who adopted you, from my adopted parents, is going to fill that gap in a way that doesn't come from an understanding of, say, the culture of where I come from, or being in proximity to adoptees who have that, let's say, um, traumatic disconnect either. And my parents could not speak to that. They absolutely couldn't. And in a way, that's by design. And so I don't inherently fault them for that, because that's how the adoptive system operates. Like, it's the I there was somebody in the chat that posted something to the fact that, like, well, if there were adoptive resources given to some of these adopted parents, they get overwhelmed with that information. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that isn't that unfortunate for the adoptive parents who made the choice to adopt transracially to then be overwhelmed by resources and information that should be inherent to that child being forced in that position? And so I think about that in ways like, well, they're allowed to be, some of those parents are allowed to be overwhelmed because the system is designed to center their feelings and their level of whelmed, if you want to call it, above the safety and the understanding and the peace of the child. So some of those resources exist, but they don't exist. Some of those resources are there, but they're not they're not handed out with the finalization of adoptive papers because that overwhelms adoptive parents, or that makes the reality of being racially different from your child more I guess more upfront, more real, more something that the system, the adoptive providers, the social workers, that makes that something that they have to actually engage in a way that it isn't pretty. It isn't cut and dry. There's nuance there. There's understanding there. There's resources there that are, if left to its devices, are easier to wipe away or easier to not engage in, and then you're just sort of left with a story. Or for me personally, like I know my mom, like my dad loved me, but to the box of my stuff, or to the understanding of like how was I put up for adoption in the first place.
Mhm.
You talk to my mom and my dad's like, oh yeah, your mom loved you, so she gave you up for adoption, and that's how we got you, so on and so forth. But
Mhm.
that my biological mother just gave me up because that's a logical, rational, sensible thing to do in order to, put me in a different position in a different country, a different culture on the other side of the globe. That language is placating. That language erases the nuance. That language erases the trauma and the difficulty of what it actually means. And not that they had any of the real answers, because again, they're stories. Like my mother couldn't tell you exactly how I got from where I
Mhm.
was in Haiti to the orphanage to their house. The
Mhm.
paperwork does not have those true facts on it, because it's part of a system that says, well, as long as you have a story, as long as you can fill your kid with love and understanding, and they assimilate to you, and they don't have any conflict with being in, Wisconsin or wherever, then you're good to go. And I'm I'm an example of a man in his 40s that says, like, yeah, that doesn't work, because while my parents love me, like, I'm in these spaces now as a representative to say, like, I mourn for my younger self the support, the understanding that was denied me because of adoption, because of this system. And now there's a resource there. Now there's AMS. Now there are transracial adoptees that say, like, hey, this isn't perfect, but like, here's what reckoning with this looks like. Here's what actually engaging with the overwhelming, adoptive resources in terms of like cultural competency, language, food, um, adopting Black or brown children, and then maybe not living in predominantly the white spaces, maybe engaging with the community members that share, melanin content with your children, if you're you know, actually about the child's well-being, and not just about your sense of comfort and ability to parent your way with your rules or your structure or your, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And that's
Thank,
that's why I'm
thank
here to sort
you.
of use that.
It's huge. So many zingers that people loved, Obersal, and they're writing in the chat, resonating, just the straightforward truth. I'm going to have one more specific question for each of you, and then we want to open it up to all of the audience. So, in the meantime, you're welcome to put a question in the chat right now, and I'll scroll and see it and ask it. So feel free. But Trisha, let me come back to you with that question that I posed around how you think you knew that being adopted was unique, even though you were kind of fully assimilating into this family where adoption really wasn't discussed. Can you remember?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things to say about that. I think, you know, in 1970, when I was actually adopted, I was born in 69 and adopted in 1970. My mom learned about um, these babies with quote unquote special needs who needed homes to be adopted into because they were biracial. And at that time, you know, babies of color were not being put with white families. And, you know, my mom was wanting a girl and she was very excited to welcome me into the family. And I think that she did do a good job of doing research to try to help me assimilate into the family. And, but I think there weren't a lot of, you know, I don't think there was a lot of information for her to go on. But then, you know, along with the adoption is just life, right? So life happens to a family, and my parents got divorced, and I moved to a white suburb. And at that point, that was when I was really trying to like get a grasp on my identity and realizing that I was different than my friends, and you know, wanting to be, you know, wanting to fit in and wanting to be the same. And at that time, an adult who was sort of tangentially related to my family, you know, not one of my parents, but told me that I would have a much easier life the whiter I could be. And so right there was just kind of an erasure of my Black self and an insecurity of, am I being white enough? Am I good enough? Because obviously the Black side of me is not good enough. And so, you know, I have spent my life trying to make up for that and trying to be as white as I can be, and you know, straightening my hair and making sure that I wear it in a hairstyle that looks like I fit in with my white friends. And so that has been, you know, a big stumbling block for me in, you know, this is something that I'm striving for that I'm never going to reach because I'm not white. I'm biracial. And so I think that that statement that happened when I was you know, 12 or 13 really set my life on a course that made it difficult for me to come to terms with my identity, to love myself, to accept myself, to just be able to feel free to be who I am without always wearing that mask. And so, you know, I feel like I feel like I'm getting to a place where I'm able to take that mask off and appreciate myself for who I am. And that's unfortunate that it's taken, you know, 55 years for that to happen. Um, and so you know, I just wish that there was more information that could have helped me. I wish I would have um, let myself experience my Black heritage. But again, you know, I wasn't exposed to that, you know, for most of my life. And so, you know, as a transracial adoptee, it's very difficult to make peace with being both yourself and then also being a member of this family, which can be kind of two different ends of a spectrum. So yeah, I think that that's what we're doing here, is kind of trying to give you a perspective on how difficult it is to develop an identity and to feel confident and safe and comfortable in your own body when you don't have a role model to look to. And you know, for me, growing up in the 70s, like I didn't see biracial people on TV, and I didn't, you know, I didn't have any role models or any idols to look up to. And my first mentor circle here with the Adoptee Mentoring Society was just a couple of months ago, maybe 2.5 months ago. And it was the first time that I had met biracial, transracial adoptees who had similar backgrounds to me. There were two women actually in that one night, and it was kind of like a breath of fresh air, and like I could put my shoulders down and be like, okay, I can say it like it really is, you know. And they both were like, yeah, totally, you know. And so it's, you know, it's challenging, and especially, you know, for someone like me who I can pass for white, certainly, but what does that do to my mind, and what does that do to my heart when I can't be all of me? I can't take all of me anywhere I go.
Oof. Say it. Reminds me of what Ilberstadt was saying a little bit, where, you know, in summary, Ilberstadt was saying that white adoptive parents can't be everything for their Black or brown children. They need to outsource some things. So, Trish, when you said your parents were like, you know, the whiter you are, the easier your life will be, that's not true. It is true, but having Black folks in your life might have said something about colorism. And yes, there is, like, I remember meeting my biological sister when I was about 10 years ago, and she is a half sister. She's a bit darker than I am. And one of the first things she said when we met for the first time, she realized she had a sister, and I was there giving her a hug as she said, "You're so lucky that you're a high yellow." It's kind of the same message you're getting, where she was saying to me, you must have an easier life than some of us really dark-skinned folks because you're closer to white. But what a different conversation that would have been for you to learn about colorism. And yes, passing as white, there are privileges, but also you are a beautiful mixed person. And let's celebrate your curls and that. If you got that message, what that might have been like. Thank you for sharing all of that. I also see Janine's comment in the chat where you wrote a lot that you are transracial adoptee raised by a Black family, and you wrote, I find it interesting that all this panelists are adoptees raised by white families. And it's not that unusual that transracial adoption is really synonymous with white parents, Black and brown kids, because of the history of race in our country. However, of course, there are other configurations, and it would be wonderful to do a fireside chat with that someday. So hopefully, Janine, you stick around and do some mentoring, and then maybe you'll be sharing like this, because that's a perspective we should also be hearing. Thank you. Before we get to some of your questions, I have one more question for each of the panelists. So Katie, you said, I think I may have said this last week when we were prepping, that you wanted your adoptive parents to explore your adoption identity with you, and that didn't go so well. Can you share? Would you be open to sharing about that?
Yeah, I definitely, just piggybacking off of what Trisha was saying, I definitely wasn't aware of how much I wanted it when I was younger, like watching certain TV shows or listening to certain music. For me, especially eating certain foods, um, I just like assimilated, and I was just like, this is my family, this is their traditions, this is what I'm gonna do. And yeah, like kind of growing more into myself, like I think I I think I really saw how much I was missing of that, when people started to come up to me just on the street or at a drive-through or at an event or something, and just start speaking Spanish to me, and like just like, you know, asking me questions in another language, and now I'm having to awkwardly be like, I don't know. I don't know Spanish like that. Like I definitely tried when I was in college, to immerse myself, and I know a little bit now, but it's definitely not my first language, or I don't feel confident in it. But it's like that's just like an example of like really kind of missing out on that, and how much now as an adult I crave it. Like I just wish so much that I had learned certain things. I think it was last year. Um, last year, I saw the movie Selena for the first time, and even though Selena's um, Mexican, and I'm Chilean. The Hispanic Latino community that are like born into it, like that's their princess of music. Like, Selena, everyone knows her. And I remember watching the movie with two of my best friends and like turning to them and being like, if this movie ends poorly and if she dies, I'm gonna be so sad. And spoiler, she dies. Um, but I just like I sat with that for weeks, for months, just like realizing that I didn't know that. And that was like last year. So it's just like things like that happen, or I mean, even just thinking about this in real time, like when I was younger, people being like, "Oh my gosh, you look so much like your mom." And I definitely like go through phases of being lighter and darker throughout the year, depending on how much sun I get. And like, if it's like winter or if I haven't been out in the sun very often, like yeah, absolutely, like Trisha said, I can pass for white. And people will make comments like, you look like your mom, and I'm I don't know what to do with that. I feel like I'm just stopped in my tracks, like, because to her it's like such a compliment, and to me I'm like, well, on the inside I just know that's not true. And I remember a couple years ago that happening, and I literally pulled my mom aside and I was like, are you going to say anything? Like, are you going to respond, or are you just going to say thank you? And she's like, well, how would you like me to respond? And I was like, with the truth, like just tell them, like, it doesn't have to be a sad thing. Like, you can be proud of the fact that I'm adopted instead of just saying thank you and moving on, like, for the compliment. So yeah, I feel now so much more desire to like have had those experiences than I really knew that I needed them when I was younger. And just going back to the comment, and I think even what Elbersa was saying about support and resources, like I definitely think there's a lot of, on paper resources of like, how to be a parent, and, how, like, what to do with your adoptive child, or like the basic parent things like food, water, shelter, education, love, like all of those things. But there's like a whole nother set of invisible resources of like emotional, spiritual, like, just like certain senses that you get when you have a whole set of generational trauma that doesn't come with your white adoptive parents. So yeah, I am so much more adventurous now than I was as a little girl. Eating new things, like trying new foods, trying to watch movies, listen to music. And it's so much fun. I love it. It's a little jarring to the family that grew up knowing that I only ate chicken fingers or like burgers or something. So they'll comment on it and they'll be like, I had no idea you like that food. And that's also kind of weird, but it's another story. But yeah, I just think like I just wonder sometimes, like, intrusive thoughts of like, if I had known X, Y, and Z, even like as a teenager, like how much more that would inform my identity now. And unfortunately, I don't see with I don't see from my parents with their actions that they want to be a part of that. Like, or even some of their words. Like, I've tried to go to counseling with them before, and for a myriad of different reasons, we stopped going. But even just introducing that to them as like, can we go back again? Like, I felt like there was some progress there. They're like, no, we don't want to go back. We don't need counseling. We don't need that. They think I need it. They're perfectly fine saying like, you need to go back to counseling, but they don't want to. So it just doesn't leave an open door for me to be like, can we go to this, you know, Hispanic Heritage Festival, or would you watch this movie with me? Like, they just they don't, it's not something they grew up with, so it's kind of like foreign to them, and they don't understand why I would want to, why I would want to go on this journey. So,
Thank you, Katie.
yeah.
Ooh, exhale
I know.
and inhale. I mean, the beautiful work and truth that you're sharing is not going unnoticed. And I saw a note from Katie and Joe Sisley, who I think are prospective adopters, perhaps, or current, but they wrote, everything you've said, Katie, is so insightful as a transracial adoptive parent. Okay, so they're currently parenting, so that's it's a beautiful thing when we have current adoptive parents willing, wanting, and then reassuring our voices.
Yeah.
Ooh, I can imagine that some of the adoptees in the room might wish our parents would even come to something like this, which makes me want to ask my next question to Q about AMS. Something that I work hard at with training the mentors is ensuring that there's lightness, levity, and laughter and fun in group mentor sessions, because adoption shouldn't be a negative, scary thing that we whisper in the corners. But in our lounges, there are so many times when we are laughing, smiling, and even wondering, is it possible to feel a sense of pride in our identities as adoptees? Let's toy with that. And I'm proud to be creating a space like that differs greatly from doing personal therapeutic, well, it is therapeutic, but therapy work, it's different. And it makes me wonder, Q, why you started mentorship with AMS?
Yeah, so I think when I have been in therapy and we've talked about resourcing myself, so I really was looking for a space to be seen and validated and listen to other perspectives. And I first joined the Adoptee Lounge back in November of 23. And I think sometimes it's not always talked about what the first experience is like. And I found it to be really overwhelming. Um, I had never heard, I had never been in a space with other adoptees speaking their truth about their lived experiences. So I really kind of fell into self comparison. I remember feeling behind, and I didn't know my story. I didn't know a lot of the terminology that was being used. And um, Yeah, so I think after that first lounge, I kind of stepped away and focused on just one-on-one mentorship. And I just really needed a space just for me to find language behind who I was. So I think the community can be extremely powerful. And just because I found it overwhelming at first doesn't mean it wasn't helpful. I think it just took a little extra time to learn that we're all in different stages in our adoption journey, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I think it's so important that you shared that. There can be a sense, I think, I've heard from some people like, I don't think I'm ready to join a lounge because I don't know this or that or this or that. And I can understand how it could feel intimidating. And how it could also be further isolating, feeling like, goodness, I'm not even good at being an adoptee. I don't know. For many people, they come in like saying, I don't know if that's any of you here, but saying, I never even knew the word transracial adoptee before this, so here I'm throwing it around with ease, and other folks are, and others are like, I've never heard that, and that's me. There's a group of us, That is absolutely overwhelming. Okay, Obersal, let's one question for you. I found it really powerful to hear about you returning to Haiti with a group of Haitians as an adult. And this was years ago, but I would love if you're able to share like what that experience meant to you.
Um, yes, it was 2018, but if you allow me to contextualize that a little bit, because Katie's story about Salima just triggered this thing about kind of where I was culturally in the 90s when she passed, and to a point, like, because I can't give my whole life story here, and I missed some things in terms of like how I got from point A to point B. Um, I want to say like English is my second language, right? Like that's like when I got here, I didn't speak English. I was 2.5 years old. Um, and my parents, you know, they were just happy and smiling, and they have me, and we're not talking to each other in a way that's like, yeah, they didn't speak Creole, and I didn't speak English. At two, however, and I'm saying this to contextualize the weight and the importance of like culture and language. Between 2.5 and three, um, based off of where I was, based off of how they looked, like I lost it like that, and it was the assimilation, um the me. I think if Angela's heard a version of the story before. Me literally one day telling my mother that I wasn't going to speak Creole anymore. I was only going to speak English, and then her having essentially pride and having that be a joyous, monumental moment, you know, for me as an almost 3-year-old, like, oh, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm making my mom proud. I got English. I'm only going to do English. And then I think back to, you know, when I get old enough to understand that point in my life, and that declaration of assimilation, and it being such a tragic thing when it comes to my culture, it comes to the language that I was born into and the place that I come from. Like I cry, I mourn that part of the other things. But like, so to the question now is, what was it like to go back in 2018 with a group of Haitian adoptees to Haiti? It it was, for me, it was everything, right? It was the only, but one of the most meaningful ways I could return to my country while being essentially a tourist, while being a foreigner in the place that I come from, right? Which is a line, or which is a sentiment that I've heard shared with many international adoptees who return to their place of origin without the language, without the culture, so on and so forth. So I was also walking in that path. And I went with a group of Haitian adoptees, some of which knew Creole, could speak the language, some of which didn't and would never learn it. And so it was as close as I could be in community, and as close as I could be to to so much of the things I was longing for when I knew to long for them. Not to give you my whole story, but like prior to 2018, like I lived in Orlando, Florida for 4 or 5 years, and coming from the Midwest, where you know you couldn't find a Haitian, to being in Miami some days, or in Orlando, where the the let's say the subclass of let's say subclass. I say that in terms of like the social economic class of you know the lower end of the spectrum. A lot of those are Haitian immigrants, Cuban immigrants, Dominican immigrants, brown and black people doing the low man's work. Those were ostensibly my people. So like, not that I was ever accepted or welcomed into those communities, but even as an outsider, like I felt as close to Haiti as I could be, being around people who spoke Creole, being around people who were there. And then in 2018, when I got an opportunity to go and touch down in a country where everybody looked like me, and again, for at that point almost 30 years of living in the States. Not to say I traveled, I did do something international, but 30 years of coming back to this systemic, realities of being a Black man in a predominantly white country, going to a place where not only am I from, but like that level of racism doesn't exist there in that way. Colorism does, social economic stuff does, classism does, but racism doesn't exist in that country. And again, I was visiting, and it was a brief, but I got to see the beauty of that place in a way that from the outside is is almost never explored. Like it's almost never mentioned when it comes to the West, engagement with Haiti for very specific reasons. We can talk about, the Haitian Revolution in 1884 and how significant that was to the Western Empire. But contemporarily speaking, you mentioned Haiti in this context. Do you think blue? Do you think tropics? Do you think, paradise? Or do you think gangs? Do you think war? Do you think poverty? Do you think assassinations? Do you think political unrest and turmoil? That's specific. There's a reason the West thinks of Haiti like that. There's a reason um, the generations of adoptees coming out of there, or let's be real, the generations of trafficked children from orphanages, from missionaries come out of there is because of how propaganda, because of how religion, because of all these things that make Haiti ripe for trafficking, ripe for plunder when it comes to the adoption industrial plot. That's how I get to the United States. So to return there in a way, as again a foreigner and tourist, it still means world to me. And I haven't been able to process that in a way that's like, just, but like I hold on to that and it's like, yeah, I was there as a visitor. I couldn't speak the language for shit, but I gotta see it, I gotta feel it, I gotta touch the beach, I gotta be on the ocean, I gotta see and experience the beauty of that place.
Yeah.
And I was grounded in knowing that like my lineage is that of revolutionaries in a very specific way that while it's akin to the Black struggle in the United States, it's separate. It's different in ways that like that are in my genes that I go back to, even though I don't necessarily have that to paint or put on a wall here. I look at Haiti, it's like, oh yeah, there's a reason why like I say like my pride in having that in me is specific to me, and not just, well, I have Black pride, I have Black, there it is, I have that, but it's also like you go deeper, it's Haitian, and that means something to me.
And I think that was the first time you heard someone who is Haitian say your name, and you heard it. Is that right? Do I remember that story?
It wasn't, but
Okay.
it's living in Austin. Incidentally, it was probably before I left. There is a small Haitian community here, and I am in contact and friends with people who engage with me in a very understanding, caring way that doesn't say innately hostile, but isn't, say, foreign. Like when I was in my 20s in Orlando, I didn't have close enough or intimate enough relationships with actual Haitians to be cared for in a way that wasn't just, tertiary. And
Right.
so like it's the difference between, being made fun of for sounding the way I sound by, Haitians, people who speak Creole, and then being understood and given grace for the way that I sound because of adoption, because I was forced and taken from my place and made to grow up here. And that isn't necessarily communicated with the dudes I'm working with in our 20s, but it is when I get older and I'm able to articulate and they understand that fracture. And
Yeah.
then Yeah, so that's where that comes from.
Thank you so much, everyone. We have like 20 minutes left, and I see a question for Trisha from Shannon, who is asking about you to share more about the overlap or the parallels between the disability world and adoption world. And Shannon writes that she's been working a lot and studying fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and how to support families through that. So I know you can speak only from your personal experience, but I think it would be awesome if you wanted to share some of the parallels that you notice. You're still muted.
Um, I I think the parallels are in sort of the marginalization, the way that people assume things about you and kind of decide who and what you are before they even get to know you. There is a lot of there's a kind of a similar to the adoptee consciousness model, I guess, is sort of working your way through a disability. And especially for someone like me with an acquired disability, there's sort of that cycle of, oh my gosh, what has happened? How am I going to live this way? To, oh, well, it's actually not that bad. There are so many things that I can do, and I don't have to worry about things I can't do. And coming to peace with that. And then having somebody else tell you that your life isn't worthwhile, or your way of living or being isn't worthwhile. And I think then there's also that trying to fit in. As a wheelchair user, I have to spend a lot of time trying to fit in with people who are non-disabled, who are standing and walking, and I'm obviously sitting. There's the, sticking out. Like when I was in high school, my brother and I were at the same school, and he's had, blonde or brown hair and bright blue eyes, and I had, curly hair and dark eyes. And, people always like, they feel like they can ask you really personal questions. Just because they can see that there is a difference. And I think that's a difficult thing when somebody wants to kind of pick you apart because they see that you're, a little bit different, or you have different, different traits, different feelings. And then just that sense of belonging, it's really hard to find when people don't understand you, or when you don't even understand yourself. And, feeling like, as somebody with a disability, I feel a lot of times, I've been sort of cast to the side as somebody whose life is awful and not worth living, and you don't have a good quality of life. And so it's just a lot of those mental things that make you feel less than. And I think that that can happen with adoption, but it also happens with disability. And so those are some of the things that I feel like I've been working through. And then what I am calling intersectionality fatigue. And that is basically all of these intersections of me requires so much education. I've had to learn so much about disability and advocacy. And now I'm learning about adoption and history and advocacy, and being biracial and history and advocacy. Like I feel like my whole life is I have to learn all of these things because I have all of these identities that can be attacked at any time. And I feel like I have to be able to speak up, and be educated about all of these things. And it's exhausting. And it's exhausting when people, treat you like you're less than, and you have to work 3 times as hard just to be seen as, on the level of everybody else. And so it's just a lot. It adds up after a while, and you're just like, can I just be me and have no questions asked, and have no assumptions made, and have no perceptions to where I, have to live up to. And so those are, some of the things that I have found between being adopted and having a disability.
Amazing, Trish. Thank you so much. It is there are norms in our culture, whether we like it or not. And norms are nuclear family model, biology, nuclear family, and able-bodied. And if you're not either one of those things, then that's where the death by 1,000 cuts microaggressions happens. And events like this hopefully is creating more allies who will help us by not making us shoulder all of that weight and doing all that work. I can't believe it, but our time is up. I think there's so much more that our panelists could say. There's questions perhaps, but part of my work is understanding that there's an end point for things, and that is healthy and boundary. And we're gonna end here and thank the panelists for their incredibly deep work. You are welcome to stay in touch with us. If you do have a burning question, you can email us at info@adopteementorship.org. But let me pass it over to Juliet, who will close us out.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Incredible bravery. Angela can tell you herself about me. I do not do these kinds of things, but they are so important. And every time I come, I am just re-energized, and I know that I'm not alone. So thank you all to our guests as well. And I sent in into the chat some contact information. Listen, we have created this organization from the ground up. And as Angela mentioned before, we do our best to compensate our panelists, but also we're doing a ton of work behind the scenes. We're working on a number of projects to help build off of the incredible foundation for our mentorship programs moving forward. So if you can, $5 donation or spread the word on social media, all of it helps. But again, thank you for just being here tonight and for showing up and for listening to our stories. Awesome.
Appreciate everybody. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We stay, right? No.
Yes, please, just for a couple minutes. Yes. Oh. Make sure everybody is out.
Is everyone?
Is that everyone? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Great job. How did that feel?
Really good.
Yeah. Say more.
I guess just kind of freeing,
Mhm.
I think it's good.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
I think it's just nice to be in a space where you can honor feelings that you maybe have never shared before and feel like, you don't have to be shameful for them. And actually, it's really, it's kind of nice because, I don't know, we all have very unique experiences that I think if more people could understand and listen to, I think there's a lot of things that you can learn. I mean, not just about adoption, but about empathy, about identity, about the importance of, you know, paying attention to the needs of your kids, whether they're biological or adopted. Like,
Yeah.
how can I be the best person for them and help them feel comfortable in their skin. I don't know. I just think that it's nice to be able to share this information, and for people who are, interested in really just understanding what we've been through, what we've experienced, and that it's as difficult as it is, it's actually also pretty cool.
Yeah, and Trish, I'm writing a speech right now for a next week event, and I'm centering it around this concept of boundary spanning. I think all of us are boundary spanners, and feel free to grab that link. It's actually written by an adoptive mother, and she highlights how especially adoptees, but transracial adoptees have unique gifts that can be really useful in like business settings and stuff. And it's just been amazing for me to think about our contributions as more than just learn, grow. Like you guys get to grow when you hear us share, but it's like, oh, we have so much power. So check out that article, Trish. I think also with the disability angle, even stronger. So yeah, great. Thank you. Gilbertstyle, you're gonna say something.
Yeah, it was like I I have this sense of like I thank you for letting me speak, and again I just heard me like, oh yeah, I did this same time last year. Again, thank you for letting me speak, thank you for letting me be on a panel, thank you for letting me engage in the way that I engage. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
not without gratitude, and
Oh yeah.
I say that to say that like if because I know there are prospective adoptees, or whatever you want to call them, people who are yet to or are going to adopt one way or another, got their hearts and minds set on it. And I feel that like sometimes in these public spaces where we're like I will speak or I will say something that at some point they stop listening. And not that there's anything I can do about that, but I wonder about the nature of the beast of the model when you get to a point where okay, you've got the information, and I might be impacted in this way, and they might settle into, okay, maybe I'll think about this thing culturally or this thing that, but I'm still going to do this thing for my reasons that that have that have less to do with a child's actual well-being at like the heart of it. And I just say like adoption and specifically transracial adoption and changing this and all the other things that go into that specific thing versus, fostering and just giving them a safe place to live in an emergency situation where the people that are in these spaces, they're already past like not thinking about that, and they're just building their family. They're just here to build their family in the best way that they want to build their family. So if they can utilize our expertise, more power to them. But primarily, they just want to build a family. And and that for me, knowing that, okay, I'm functioning to the benefit of that child, hopefully in some way, but it's still ultimately like contributing to a what I believe is a fundamental detriment to that child. So I'm having the consciousness and understanding like, oh yeah, I'm not changing anybody's minds, which is a dream, but it's also I'm sitting with oh, I'm helping them do better at this thing I don't want them to do at all. Or I'm helping them to do better at this thing that I fundamentally don't think should exist in the way that it does.
Yeah.
And so like
yeah.
I don't, like I said, I'm grateful. I hope that's part of the crowd. I hope people do that, but like also at the same time, it's like
I hear that too.
it's still contributing to this thing that like I'm advocating against. Like,
Yes.
and this advocation against it sometimes like in this context, in this frame, it's not advocacy against it. It's just advocacy for it. And that's what I'm wrestling with right now.
I hear you. And it's why AMS is not 100% fireside chats to educate hopeful adoptive parents, because we don't want more adoptive parents, but it's a sliver of our work. And much of my thought is it's more about each of you and our adoptees getting strength in speaking like this.
Yeah.
Which means, I mean, and I think there's could be some healing capacity to speak to adopters who aren't your parents, but they feel like our parents in the audience sometimes, you know, like when I see people who proudly stated, I'm an adoptive parent, can't wait to learn. I do project onto them some of your parents, you know, and I think, okay, I know they're not talking to their parents, but it can be healing to like say it. So there's more of my thought around what we're doing with these. Byproduct, okay, people get to hear, but you know, the people we really want to be in the room probably aren't coming to this. The adoptive parents we really want never gonna come. It's out of our control. I wrestle too, Obersal, and I hear your gratitude. So we are thankful that you spoke.
I also wanted to say, because and like I treat these things like, adaptive lounges anyway. Q, it's good to see you, Katie. I don't necessarily say that last time. It's good to see you, Katie. And Trissa, to people I don't know, um, and you may don't know me for Adam, but just based off of listening to you guys' input, like I'm like immensely proud of the steps you guys taken in what feels like a year of change, and sometimes a less than that, in terms of being involved in this community in a way that I, speaking from a quote unquote vet perspective, have have not grown jaded into, but grown very accustomed to having a sense of ease about this. And then hearing people who are just getting into this like last year or 2 years ago, and then you guys' sense of like command and speaking in public and speaking about, adoption specifically, Trisha, versus like the advocacy for, wheelchair bound folks, and just being like, oh yeah, that's AMS at its finest, and you guys are AMS at its finest. Like just having a voice, having an opinion, and being able to say that with adoptees and with non-adoptees is also like why I enjoy being a part of these circles. So thank you. And
Q, how are
Katie,
you
you
feeling?
I am feeling really good. I am really thankful for this opportunity, and just being here with all of you has been incredible. I feel like just listening to you all, I have felt seen and validated. And yeah, I never would have imagined that I'd be speaking tonight. So I guess I'm happy and proud of myself. So
My apologies for misusing the time. I had thought 7:30, so there was not a lot of time for audience questions. Sorry. I think it was
In a way, I obviously would have loved to have had audience questions, but in a way, there was like a part of me during the talk where, like when it's just us and like we can speak freely without shame and like talk about our experiences, like in a way, I still feel like that kind of happened, but it was like live, like in front of people.
wow.
So it was like kind of cool to not have questions, even though like I was excited about questions, but on the opposite side, since it didn't happen, I don't feel like really any of us like held back our opinions really.
Yeah.
And everyone was just able to just like listen and like that's it.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, I've never experienced that. Like I've only experienced that kind of like freedom of who I am with y'all. And now it was like in front of other people. So that was kind of cool.
Yes. They were muted. They were not talking back. They were just listening. Oh, it's so good. Commanding. Thank you all. Beautiful job. We're gonna close out, but you represented AMS really incredibly, and adopted people. So grateful.
Thank
think
you,
I'm-
Angela. Thank you and Julia and Amanda for facilitating the conversation. So
Thank you
Yeah.
all. It was great to meet all of you.
You in Houston? We gotta link up.
I am. Yeah, I heard you're in Austin, right?
I know. So like, what's happening? What's happening?
Yeah,
Like,
let me see if I can get your email and I'll reach out to you. Are you in, but you're in Austin, right?
yeah, but like Houston is a weekend. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
might drop my kid off there tomorrow. So like, it's
Yeah, no, let me I'll get your email or put it in the chat real quick. But we go to Austin semi-frequently. So yeah.
same
Love
gang
it.
gang.
Okay, bye team. Stay in touch. Feel free to add thoughts on the loungers about tonight, to encourage other people to take this step too.
Just
Great. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.